everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Angie Speaks. I'd like to say a kind of sarcastic thank you to my Patreons for choosing the subject that I'm about to cover today. It's been a pretty full-on week of research and diving down all these weird rabbit holes, so thanks, I guess. So in case you're wondering what today's subject is going to be about, I'm going to be talking about conspiracy culture and analysing it from a leftist perspective. We're going to be diving down some pretty deep rabbit holes, so stick around and hopefully you'll enjoy what comes next.
This is their plan, people. These are demons. It's basically an intergalactic invasion into this space through people. I'm telling you, it's what all the ancients said, it's what they warned of, it's what we're dealing with.
Who have seen this phenomenon of seeing someone, a human, suddenly transform into a reptilian figure and then come back again. And the ancient accounts talk about the same thing.
But if we're struggling with our modern technology, is it really logical to suggest that our ancestors did this with pivots and with little ropes and with wooden rollers?
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna need something stronger to get through this video. Conspiracy culture has been a dominant element of the Western imagination for centuries, and it's manifested itself in many different forms throughout history. If you search deeply enough, there's a conspiracy theory about just about anything you can imagine. Trust me, I've spent a whole week diving down all kinds of weird rabbit holes. From hip-hop culture to the halls of political power, beliefs about secret cabals and sinister forces that control global politics lurks in the minds of millions of people around the globe. This phenomenon is also heavily influenced by political leanings and divides. As a leftist, it can be incredibly difficult to navigate this subject area because the right wing, especially those with nefarious leanings, have used conspiracy culture to spread lies, misinformation, disparage vulnerable groups, and justify some pretty fucked up political beliefs. And to be quite honest, the right wing has heavily dominated this subject and used it to warp the minds of millions. In most cases, it is justifiable for us to dismiss conspiracy theories wholesale and disparage those who subscribe to them, especially when it comes to dangerous misinformation. But by doing so in every case, I think we miss out on unlocking the important psychological meanings behind these strange forms of folklore and what it can tell us about our culture and the collective unconscious. I believe that hidden deep within these conspiracies are truths about the anxieties, the fears, and the paranoia surrounding our current culture. In some cases, conspiracies and fringe ideas actually turn out to be true, and I think wholesale dismissal can often lead us to ignore the more insidious elements working within our culture and within institutions. Since the very beginning of human institutions, there have been beliefs about forces acting in the shadows to harm and undermine groups within the population. This phenomenon is not only limited to powerless groups, the establishment is also affected by this weird delirium. Author Jesse Walker, writer of The United States of Paranoia, argues that conspiracy theories throughout history can be categorized into 5 different groupings. Paranoia and fear about an enemy above, fear from the establishment about an enemy below, fear from the general population about an enemy outside, and fear about infiltration from within. And also the rare but present benevolent conspiracy, the idea that there is some kind of secret society benevolently guiding humanity through the ages. Historically, the zeitgeist has shifted between these different categories, and the political climate of a specific period plays a huge role in the typeset of conspiracy theories that manifest within the political spectrum. Some of the earliest and most damaging conspiracy theories are directed towards, you guessed it, the Jews. 16th century European churches spread conspiracy theories that blamed the Jewish population for everything from poor harvests to infant mortality. Jews were accused of poisoning wells, and the term blood libel originated at this time as an anti-Semitic conspiracy that accused Jews of sacrificing Christian children in religious rites. This is a clear case of the enemy within model of conspiratorial folklore that projected fears about a minority population actively working to undermine the majority. These false tales spread through medieval Europe, and the Jewish communities within these areas were heavily persecuted and marginalized because of them. In ancient Rome, the ruling class was incredibly paranoid about the new fringe religion of Christianity. The Roman Empire believed that Christians literally drank blood in their religious rites, and the Roman establishment used this as a call to action to persecute Christians. On the other side of the coin, the persecuted Christians believed that the Emperor Nero was the manifestation of the Antichrist figure mentioned in the Book of Revelations, and they believed that his reign signaled the end of times and the return of the new kingdom. Historically, the intersection between mysticism, religion, and institutional power has been ripe and fertile soil for the growth of conspiracy theories. People from all walks of life gravitate towards this kind of thinking, and there's a deep belief that there are forces working to undermine the status quo. The founding of the United States is an area of history steeped in conspiracy and political paranoia. There were fears about Freemasonry within the highest reaches of government, anxieties about the pagan and animist practices of the native population, and hysterical panics about witches and the influence and power of women. All of which caused the suffering of marginalized groups and contributed to their persecution. From the very founding of the nation, whisperings about secret cabals and sinister forces dominated the zeitgeist, and it had a deleterious effect on both the establishment and the general population. This evolved and shifted throughout American history, and the post-war period became a high point of conspiracy culture. The Red Scare and Mccarthyism is another example of both the fear of an enemy within and the fear of an outside enemy. The American government became feverishly paranoid about communist subversion and went to extreme lengths to eradicate suspected communists. This example shows how political paranoia is not only limited to fringe elements of society, it also reaches the highest halls of influence. Watergate, the Jfk Assassination, Roswell, and ideas about the New World Order all had their genesis during this period of post-war peace. And this also goes to show that during periods of relative ease, conspiratorial thinking can still flourish. The satanic panic of the 1980s was a mixture of culture war narratives from the evangelical right wing and religious paranoia. Preachers and evangelists warned vigilant parents about the evils of Dungeons and Dragons, fantasy literature, and video games, as they believed that all these were gateways for young children into the occult, and that the government and Hollywood were in collaboration with the satanic New World Order. Post 9/11, conspiracies shifted away from the areas of religion and mysticism and became more critical of the government and the establishment on both sides of the political spectrum. The 9/11 Truther movement was born out of the shockwaves of this national catastrophe, and millions began to question the validity of the official narrative about the terror attacks. From members of the ruling class to government agencies to everyday civilians across the political spectrum, it seems as if nobody is immune from conspiratorial thinking. And the crazy catch-22, the thing that makes all of this even more confusing, is the fact that some conspiracies throughout history have actually turned out to be true. There's actually enough historical evidence of actual conspiracies taking place, and this makes it really hard to unpick fact from fiction. In the 1980s, there was a conspiracy theory within the black community about white doctors injecting black children with the HIV virus. Although this was never objectively proven, there have been many instances of medical abuse and eugenics conspiracies aimed at the African American community. One example of this is the Tuskegee experiments. Black men and women were forcibly injected with syphilis, and there have been many proven cases on record of eugenics programs that sterilized black men and women without their consent. Mkultra is another conspiracy that is grounded in historical evidence. Government agencies and the CIA were in fact experimenting with psychological tools and using different methods to experiment with mind control. The CIA and the FBI also employed counterintelligence apparatus to subvert and even kill groups deemed dangerous to the state. Many included civil rights groups and anti-war movements. The majority of conspiracies throughout history that have actually turned out to be true are typically characterized by powerful institutions abusing their power to undermine vulnerable groups. Moreover, these are often much less sensational and less visible compared to the outlandish and wild claims that are usually associated with conspiracy theories that powerful groups employ to disparage and demonize less powerful populations. The birth of the internet and social media has also added a ton of gasoline to this conspiracy fire by creating new mediums from which these conspiracies can collectivize and invade the zeitgeist. I don't think it's possible to discuss conspiracy in the age of the internet without first discussing meme theory. Meme theory is the idea that cultural affects, behaviors, styles, beliefs, and ideas are transmitted from person to person within a culture, and memes act as the cultural unit of this idea. Memes act as cultural genes that self-replicate, mutate, and respond to environmental pressures. If we bring conspiracy culture into this context, the internet helps speed up this cultural process and allows these genes to spread much quicker than they would otherwise be able to. Even harmful and dangerous ideas are not immune to this process of escalation. The age of the internet and social media has allowed conspiracy culture across the political spectrum to metastasize and integrate with other social phenomena. This has also created an osmosis of different conspiracy theories and previously unaffiliated groups, from Illuminati conspiracies in hip-hop to ancient alien theory to flat earth theorists, and even paranoia surrounding chemtrails and GMO foods. It's incredibly difficult to unpick the political underpinnings of these forms of conspiracies because they're found across all areas of the political spectrum. The major difference between left-wing and right-wing conspiracies is that right-wing conspiracies tend to be focused on weeding out an enemy within, and a lot of the time it's focused on weeding out an outside threat of some kind. Whenever it's a perceived threat from above, it's usually only aimed at liberal institutions, and right-wingers tend to make exceptions for people who align with them politically. When you examine conspiracy theories from the left, it is almost always a perceived threat from above, aimed towards major institutions and corporations. There are also fears about infiltration and subversion from law enforcement and intelligence agencies, but these are slightly more grounded in historical accuracy. Left-wing conspiracies are usually few and far between. This form of culture has been heavily dominated by the center, the far right, and Christian fundamentalists. Right now, it would be incredibly remiss if I didn't mention Alex Jones, the internet's most famous conspiracy theorist. Alex Jones is a right-wing conspiracy pundit, and his presence has been a lingering force within the American political sphere for decades. His beliefs are incredibly hard to unpick, and it's obvious that he cynically employs conspiracy theory to push a very dangerous and very specific political agenda. Alex Jones has managed to incorporate all of the conspiracy typesets in his garbled cosmology because he sees threats everywhere, and he has managed to convince his viewers that there are threats coming from above, from below, from within, and from without. The globalists and the shape-shifting interdimensional satanic cabal are the above threat in his mind that are manipulating and working in tandem with oppressed groups, international bodies, and elements of the US government. In the age of the internet, conspiracy theory has become the new weapon used to wage cultural wars by the right wing. It has become the primary tool used to disparage vulnerable groups, spread lies, smear victims, and these have had incredibly corrosive effects within our tangible reality. It is obvious that the right wing has weaponized conspiracy culture in a way that distracts from the very real threats that we collectively face, in favor of preserving the status quo and further perpetuating stigmatizing lies about outgroups and social minorities. This tactic is not only politically expedient, it is also financially lucrative for those who act as primary sources of political paranoia. Alex Jones has managed to create a multi-million-dollar empire by preying on the fears and paranoid fantasies within the collective unconscious. Everything from a fear of government subversion to the loss of male virility have been capitalized on by these opportunists and act as diversions from real problems and concerns. QAnon has also grown out of the Trump-era political vortex and diverted the attention of millions of Americans who believe that this anonymous 4chan user is an insider within the Trump administration and is leaking secrets to the public about nefarious activities within the so-called deep state. The deep state is another one of these amorphous terms thrown around by conspiracy theorists, used to describe various government institutions that are apparently working together in some form of shadow government, working to undermine American political autonomy. It's all very, very confusing. All in all, conspiracy culture has evolved rapidly due to the birth of the internet, and the age-old tradition of American political paranoia has continued in more insidious forms that continue to spread fear, propaganda, lies, misinformation, and have even caused real violence to break out in real life. Folklore and myths have been a major part of human society since the very beginning, and have continued throughout history in various different forms. Anthropologists examine mythology and folklore to gain knowledge about the social structure, the climate, the beliefs, the rules, and the stigmas and fears of a given society. As much as people on the left tend to dismiss conspiracy theory as the realm of paranoid fantasists, I believe that conspiracy theory is a form of modern folklore, rich for examination and deconstruction. They can point us in the direction of some of the illnesses that have infected our collective unconscious. The social contract between people and the government has been breached so many times that people no longer have faith in institutions. And this could manifest positively, but I fear it has manifested itself in apathy and indifference. Conspiracies also teach us that vulnerable groups and historically abused groups are still suffering the trauma of past abuses, and the stories they create are a reflection of that. We can also see a deep-seated fear of the sociological other in right-wing conspiracies, and the paranoia that results from a deep fear of societal change and social progress. Conspiracy culture, when examined, can act as a diagnostic tool to unlock a myriad of social pathologies that are eroding our culture. In the 1970s, Robert Anton Wilson's book, Illuminatus, sparked new interest in this area of study among those who would otherwise dismiss it. Illuminatus is a psychedelic and wild parody of conspiracy culture, yet the narrative is littered with historical and psychological truths about the roles that conspiracies play in shaping our collective reality. The thesis of Illuminatus is that reality is malleable and heavily influenced by the world of our perceptions and beliefs. Conspiracy culture is a projection and a way to explain the turmoil of a chaotic world by people who are afraid of the complexity of our reality. However, this does not make conspiracy culture any less dangerous or worth the attention of rational people. Yes, there are conspiracies at play in the world all the time, and powerful institutions are constantly abusing their power and covering up heinous crimes. However, the reality is a lot less sensational than the fiction that we sometimes project, and this fiction can often act as a distraction from what's really going on. Modern conspiracy culture is rife with a sense of hypervigilance, anger. There are clear feelings of a loss of control, alienation, and paranoia that has grown out of a deep distrust of authority and institutions. These feelings and inclinations are valid, but the framing is what can be dangerous and misleading at times. Right-wing conspiracy pundits like Alex Jones use this form of folklore to push chaos, fear, discrimination, and diversion. The reason why this is so effective is because they are speaking in a language that appeals to the mythological imagination. This is an incredibly powerful tool because compelling stories tend to be more popular than cold, hard truths and realities. Modern conspiracy folklore has generated a new mythos full of characters, settings, images, iconography, and subcultures have inevitably emerged around them. Information is more readily available than ever before in human history, yet this area of culture has still persisted and become even stronger and more accessible. We are living in a world that is nearly impossible to understand, and when information and intelligent speculation fails, it is easier to imagine sinister forces than it is to accept the reality of the unknown and the mysterious. As I said before, conspiracies have in fact occurred throughout history, and these events have damaged the trust between people and their governments and exposed the layers of coercion and control working within major institutions. However, this vacuum of distrust and paranoia can be easily manipulated by people who have a nefarious political agenda. Malicious and disparaging conspiracies about certain communities, lies and slander all have real-life consequences and can sometimes even result in violence. Challenging official narratives is a healthy and crucial part to forming a coherent worldview. But it is also important to remain critical and skeptical of alternative narratives at the same time. Fear and paranoia are not the best place to start from when it comes to forming a worldview or finding the truth, and these emotions often cloud our ability to operate from a place of rationality, empathy, and compassion. I was gonna end this by writing some kind of quippy, inspirational ending statement, but I think this next clip from Alan Moore basically sums up my whole worldview when it comes to political conspiracies. So check it out.
Covering things such as the heroin smuggling during the Vietnam War, the cocaine smuggling during the war in Central America, the Kennedy assassination, and other highlights. What I learned during the frankly horrifying research that I had to slog through to accomplish this was that yes, there is a conspiracy. In fact, there are a great number of conspiracies that are all tripping each other up, and all of those conspiracies are run by paranoid fantasists and ham-fisted clowns. If you are on a list targeted by the CIA, you really have nothing to worry about. If, however, you have a name similar to somebody on a list targeted by the CIA, then you are dead. The main thing that I learned about conspiracy theory is that conspiracy theorists actually believe in a conspiracy because that is more comforting. The truth of the world is that it is chaotic. The truth is that it is not the Jewish banking conspiracy, or the grey aliens, or the 12-foot reptiloids from another dimension that are in control. The truth is far more frightening. Nobody is in control. The world is rudderless.
That's right, folks. The truth is way more terrifying than you could even imagine. Nobody's in charge. The world is chaotic. Thank you guys so much for watching, and thanks to my Patreons for choosing this subject. It was quite onerous, so I guess the next thing I cover is going to be a lot lighter and less, heavy. If you would like to become a Patreon, I have a link to it in the description. You'll get access to early content. You'll also be able to join my new Discord server that I've set up, where we have monthly hangouts which actually get on the channel. So if you actually want to be featured on the channel, consider becoming a Patreon today. Then the Discord hangout is going to be in the next couple of weeks. So I'll upload that to the channel and you guys will be able to see that. And don't forget to leave questions for me down in the comment section for the Q&A. That's going to be happening too. Thank you guys so much, and I shall see you later.